Hi, everybody. Hi, Diana. Hi, Neev. Hi, Jerry. Thanks for joining us. Um, Obviously, Jerry Gore. He's co-founder of Action for Diabetes. Action for Diabetes is a UK registered charity dedicated to closing the gaps and to ensure free access to life-saving medical supplies, healthcare services, continue education for disadvantaged young people living with type 1 in Southeast Asia. Obviously, Diana and Neev are part of that amazing charity as well. So we're going to kind of co-host together and speak to and speak about the work of Action for Diabetes. If that's okay, Jerry?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for inviting me and Diana and Neev.
Yeah. So what we generally do is we'll do kind of some icebreakers, which is we term it the 90-second quick fire section, and it's an icebreaker to get to know you and get you to know your type 1 stuff and various things. So I have got a little thing. So this is for my cat. So we tried to get our cat to recognise kind of meal times, but it never worked. So I've got a little bell which I'm probably going to use somehow to kind of swap. So I'm going to ask 6 questions, all diabetes related. So Diana, Neev, and Jerry. So Jerry first, Diana second, Neev third. So if I do question 1 and then answer quick as you can, and then it should take 90 seconds, but it usually pans out to about 10 minutes. So there you go. Okay, so question 1. Are we ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yay! I like this. Okay. What's your name? When were you diagnosed, and how old were you, Jerry?
Okay, so my name is Jerry Gore. I was diagnosed in 2001, and I was 40.
Yay. Diana?
My name's Diana Maynard. I was diagnosed in 1980 and I was 8.
And Neev?
Hi, I'm Neev Renton, and I was diagnosed in 2010 and I was 18 months old.
Oh, wow. Wow, tiny. Okay, so finger prick, or do you use smart technology? If you do use technology, what do you use? Flash, CGM, etc. Jerry?
So I use both. I use BGMs and CGMs, and the CGM that I use is the Freestyle, and the BGM is the Contour Next.
Okay, and Diana?
I use the Libra 2 CGM, which I stream via my phone to my smartwatch.
Okay.
And yeah, that's it.
And Neev?
So I'm on the artificial pancreas, so that's the closed loop. So I have a Libra 3 with a Ypsomed pump, and it all works closed loop through my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that bleeds in a little bit to question 3: insulin pens or pump. Obviously, Neev, you've said you're kind of running an artificial pancreas, the Ypsomed. Jerry and Diana, what do you use?
So I use insulin pens. I tried a pump for 2 years, didn't like it, but I use long-acting Levemir and short-acting Humalog.
Okay. Diana?
I use an Ypsomed pump. I've used a pump for about 27 years now, so I've been through a few pumps. I was one of the first people actually in the UK pump, and the reason I went on the pump was because I lost quite a lot of my sight due to diabetes, and I had really bad control, just because I couldn't get good control on MDI, and I basically acquired a pump and told my doctor I was going to try pump therapy, and he agreed to support me, luckily.
And you'd never given it back.
and that was the one thing that stopped my sight deteriorating any further. So I'm lucky to retain some of my sight since. So you'll have to prize it off my dead body, basically.
I know. Once you, I've been kind of pumping for about 6 years, and it's just been a life changer. It's once you kind of, and particularly nowadays with Control IQ and T-Slim, it's just it's just incredible the difference it makes to your life. It's just brilliant. Okay, so everybody, what's your go-to hypo treatment, Jerry?
So many, but I do like hot buttered muffins with honey.
Wow. Don't they take a bit of time to do whilst you
I got to be absolutely honest, they do. I don't often use them. No, anything fast acting, it's orange juice or Coke or whatever I can get my hands on. Invariably, if I'm cycling or climbing, it's a Twix, and I find Twix is good. It gets me up high and keeps me high. I can't stand these full of sugar gels or whatever, because they just get you up and then drop you flat again.
Absolutely. Diana, what do you?
I just have to say, it's not very easy to carry a hot buttered muffin around in your pocket. So I have to say, when I was first diagnosed in the 80s, they advised us to carry an orange around in our pockets in case we went hypo, which also is not very practical. It depends where I am and what I'm doing. I love gels. So I do use gels when I'm out and about. I often use gels, especially when I'm doing active stuff, because they just work so fast for me. Bring me up really quick. But otherwise, I get a bit sick of them all the time, though. So any kind of sweets, really. Totally depends. Might be chocolate if I'm sat at home doing something. Could be anything, really. I do like a rice cake with Biscoff if I'm at home.
It's funny. It's funny the thing you mentioned about the fruit, because you said 1980. I was diagnosed in 78, and they kind of told us kind of similar things. It was and so I always used to carry fruit, but usually if I was golfing, I'd stick a couple of pieces of fruit in my golf bag, until one time when I'd forgotten I'd stuck a banana in, and then last game of the just before I went on a holiday, and I came back, and the next time I reached into my golf bag after about 3 months, it was just disgusting.
I've done that so many times.
Oh,
I always carry an emergency banana pretty much whenever I travel.
Yeah. It was horrible.
Yeah, I've done it many times.
What about you, Neev?
I usually have fruit pastels or jelly babies, but I guess it does depend on what I have on me and what's in the bag, really.
Okay.
But yeah, they're my usual go-to.
Yeah, jelly babies. I don't like jelly babies, and so they make sense to me to be at hypo sweets, because I'll never eat more than I need. And they're kind of and that's a self-referral. So it's self-preservation thing. Usually, if you have things that you like, you'll go through the old packet using the hypo as an excuse. So
yeah, definitely.
I actually have the opposite problem with that. I used to carry glucose tablets, and I hate them so much. I would not have them, and I just keep going more and more hypo rather than actually eat the glucose tablets in my pocket.
Yeah.
So it was counterproductive having something I don't like.
Yeah, like trying to eat chalk.
Yeah. So I stopped bothering now to carry them, because I know I'm never going to eat them.
So this is an odd question. Which do you think is worse, feeling hypo or hyper? Jerry?
And I got to be honest, I don't think it's a hard question at all. I don't feel hardly anything hyper. I just feel maybe so difficult to explain, but I probably feel a little bit dizzy or a bit fluffy, furry. It's hardly an anything. Hypos, oh my goodness. We're talking descending into the gates of hell. I mean, I can literally get in a world where, I really have to help myself when I get out of, because it's a horrible world. I'm alone, I'm isolated, there's no one else there, I'm the last person on the planet. It's really deep and dark. And so yeah, I don't like deep hypos.
Yeah, it is interesting, the physical and kind of emotional mixture, and that, I think that lack of control sometimes that kind of happens when you have, you know, bad hypos. It's always been something which yeah, I think. But on the other side, I think it's easier to control a hypo and do something about it than it is to control a high. Very often it's, you know, with highs and stuff, I find those more frustrating, just because literally I can't pop 3 jelly babies and sort it out. It's, you know, it's having to wait. And so yeah, it's always, you know, both contain an emotional aspect which, you know, does almost a lack of control.
I'd also go another level and say that, you know, hypo and hyper are way too simplistic. I could think of at least 4 different types or levels of hypo, and they're all pretty different from each other. But the difference between a really deep one requiring third-party intervention and a light hypo dipping down to say 3, 3.2, 3.5 is chalk and cheese. And
Yeah.
I'm invariably, you know, around 4, a little bit under 4. And yeah, I can dip down to 1.5, and yeah, I'm horrible. I mean, I'm really horrible. Like, I wake my wife up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she's videoed me. And literally, if I showed you one of those videos, you'd be scared. It's really nasty. And that's a totally different experience from just going a little bit low, feeling weak, yeah, I need some jelly babies or something. You see what I mean?
Yeah, particularly that, you know, a personal, you know, a personal thing for me is the whole question of hypos when driving. You know, that whole thing about a hypo is not a hypo. You know, they all are different in, and it's that, you know, the moment you're below 5 just, yeah. Anyway, don't get me started. Sorry, sorry, Diana.
Yes. So, I mean, you've basically just said exactly what I was going to say about hypos and hypers. I mean, Jerry's right that there's so many levels of hypo. So if we're talking about even, I mean, we have to be talking about a sort of severe-ish hypo on either side versus severe hyper. But I'm lucky because, unlike Jerry, I can count on the fingers of one hand the number of times I've had a really bad hypo that I've not been able to get myself out of. And even then I've been able to. So I've never really had I don't tend to have those really, really horrible ones that Jerry does. Hyper for me is, like you say, it's more frustrating because it takes so blooming long to bring it down. And it's often a case of trying different things to figure out what's going to bring it down. So it's not knowing. So you might be taking loads of insulin and nothing's happening, and it might be air. I've had air in the pump tubing, for example, and you can take what you think is loads of insulin and nothing's happening because you're taking air, or your infusion set's disconnected, or something's wrong with it. So it's more frustrating with a hyper, although it's less limiting in that it doesn't immediately stop you from doing something, whereas a bad hypo will do. But it's much more easily fixable. So, for example, if I'm running and I have a hypo, it's really frustrating. But, you know, if I stop and treat it and I wait however long it takes, it's fine. But if I'm running and I'm hyper, I'm just like running through treacle and feeling sick for an hour, even if I've taken insulin to bring it down. So I think in that sense, it's kind of worse. But yeah, you can't really compare. I think they're really chalk and cheese.
What about you, Neev?
For me, I'm not so keen with hypos because I just get quite emotional and dizzy and confused. And exactly what Joe said before, you feel quite lonely and you don't really know what's going on, and I just hate that feeling. And when I'm hyper, definitely I get how frustrating it is because you're just sat waiting wherever you are, and usually that is because of some pump air in the tube or cannula failure. But yeah, I definitely don't like hypos. I can tell you that. So yeah.
Final question, because time's tight and we're getting, sorry, it's my own fault. I'm terrible, aren't I? Okay, one thing you like about diabetes, if there's such a thing, and one thing you don't like about diabetes.
I'll be really quick because you're absolutely right. We're definitely way over our schedule already. One thing I like about diabetes is the fact that it's introduced me to a whole wide range of people I would never have met before. And the thing I don't like about it is it mucks up my life almost every day.
Diana?
One thing I don't like, aside from what Jerry has said, one thing I do like, aside from what Jerry said about meeting lots of people, is that I think it's taught me so much about. It's taught me so much about my body, about nutrition, about health, that I would never have learned all that without having diabetes. One thing I don't like, having to plan everything, just having to think about it constantly, 24/7. You never escape it.
What about you, Neev?
One thing I dislike is, well, as a teenager, I find it quite annoying carrying lots of stuff around with me, and making sure I've got everything on me. And one thing I do like is being able to skip lunch queue at school. That's quite positive. Sorry. I like that.
I'm the same. I'm the same whenever I've got my little sunflower lanyard and I go through fast track at the airport. That's always makes me very smug.
Yeah, you feel really good. Yeah.
Right. So brilliant. So that's kind of broken the ice, and so now we're going to do the kind of lived experience chat, and so Neev, Diana, Jerry, representing various life stages, teens, 20s, 50s, 60s. It's basically it's highlighting T1D as a lifelong condition, and being active as you all are and having a fulfilled life is a way that we can deal with the problems with T1 if we're optimistic and kind of organized and enthusiastic enough. Apparently there's a recording of Tom, you're going to play the recording of Fiona.
I do have the recording, but I just wanted to double check with Jerry. Would you like to do the experience chat first, and then we'll play the recording towards the end? Conscious of time now, or would you like me to play the recording first?
I think what I would do is just play the recording, but maybe just don't play all of it because we are running a bit short. Maybe, I don't know, play something like 8 minutes of it or something, because I think it gives a good background to kind of what we're talking about Action4Diabetes. It gives kind of sets the scene, if you like.
Yeah. So let's come back for around 10 to, and then we'll head into our next section. So enjoy, sit back, and enjoy learning a little bit about Action4Diabetes.
Hi, Fiona. It's great to be able to have a quick chat with you today. For a start, can you give us a quick introduction and tell us more about your role at Action4Diabetes?
Hi, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Fiona Ui. I'm the Regional Manager at Action4Diabetes, based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I have worked for A4D for 8 years now, and it really has gone by so quickly. My role is primarily to ensure the operations run smoothly at A4D and managing the team at A4D in their various roles. Another important part of my work is to build new partnerships and collaborations that can extend A4D's reach and impact in a sustainable way. This can look like networking with potential partners, looking for funding or grants, and working on mutually beneficial agreements.
Thank you so much. Has this always been your role since the beginning?
Well, A4D was founded in 2015 by Charles Toomey and Jerry Gore. And I remember when they first hired me back in 2016, they had only one partner clinic in Yangon, where they first saw a very real need in the country. When I was hired, my role was not clearly defined compared to now, but the instruction was simple. Help them to get the charity set up and running, and help as many children living with type 1 diabetes as possible. Back then, a lot of my work was about growing our reach and impact by expanding to different provinces and countries all over Southeast Asia. This meant a lot of legwork on the ground in each country, knocking on doors of hospitals, doctors, medical societies, and anyone who would be able to help us help those living with type 1 diabetes and their family.
So how many countries is A4D operating in today?
We are now in 7 countries working to close the gaps in type 1 diabetes care. So we have Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and the newly addition is the Philippines. We have just started our first clinic support program site last month, actually a couple of weeks ago. So, and we are expecting to open another 6 to 8 clinics in the Philippines over the next 6 months.
Oh, that's great. That's really, really exciting. Can you tell us a bit more about the work that A4D does?
Okay. Our mission has always been the same since the beginning, which is to close the gaps in type 1 diabetes care throughout Southeast Asia. These gaps may be in form of access to critical medical care or necessary medicines like life-saving insulin treatment, and also medical supplies, or in the form of access to the right type 1 diabetes information or education. What is apparent to us is the gaps and challenges that exist for type 1 diabetes care in Southeast Asia are very different from what we see in the developed nations. An example of this is when A4D started our work in Laos back in 2016. We worked with one of our partners, Mahosut Hospital, to diagnose and treat the first case of type 1 diabetes. Prior to that, type 1 diabetes goes undetected, and unfortunately, the children end up dying. Many of the children on our program come from very poor backgrounds, and if not for the support they receive from A4D, they will not be able to afford the medical care and supplies they need to survive. We support close to 1,000 children on our program at the moment with free access to life-saving medical resources and support systems.
You mentioned gaps in access to type 1 diabetes education and information. What do you mean by that, and how does A4D help with that?
Okay. Many of the children and young people on our program do not have access to the right education. Most of them come from poor socioeconomic backgrounds and only have access to any form and do not have access to any form of type 1 diabetes education when they see doctors, and they do not have access to any form of the education except when they see the doctors perhaps once in every 3 to 4 months or even 6 months. In between that time, if they have any questions, they have no one to ask and have no idea where to look. A4D has a web-based platform called Hello Type 1, which has easy to understand type 1 diabetes education in graphics, poster, videos, and most importantly in language and culture they understand. We have launched a Hello Type, we will talk about that maybe later. A4D also runs type 1 diabetes family camps, which are typically 2 days, 1 night, or sometimes even 3 days, 2 nights camps, with a focus on learning how to manage type 1 diabetes through games and fun activities, together with at least one caregiver or family member. We have seen the camps yield great results in helping the children learn how to prepare healthy meals, manage their own blood glucose testing and insulin injections. The camps are also a great way for peer-to-peer learning and support. The children realize that there are so many other children living with type 1 diabetes, and that helps them with psychosocial support as well. We know a group of young girls from Myanmar who continue to stay in touch after the camp. They have become good friends. So providing a level of friendship they did not get in school. It was really touching, and it's a good story to tell as always.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that little section there. Jerry, shall we pause that there and then hand to you? I think that really gives our community a sort of picture, a little bit about Action for Diabetes. So thank you so much for your team for taking the time to do that.
No worries. Shall I just go into my lived experience and we'll kick off like that? Or would you like to start with Neev or Diana?
I think we had Neev first, and then Diana, and then yourself. So we can go in that order if it's cool. But we're gonna hand to you, and you're gonna sort of coordinate this with Diana and Neev. Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, great. So let me just introduce each speaker one by one. So Neev Renton is. So can you hear me all right? Yep. So Neev is 15 years old. She did her first fundraising insulin challenge for Action for Diabetes when she was 6. Neev is I'm quite emotional when I say this. Neev is literally one of my greatest heroes. I love Neev. She is so strong. She's always been strong, and she knows what she wants to do. And she's a great ambassador, young ambassador for this complex condition. So without further ado, I'm going to hand straight over to you, Neev. Go for it.
Thank you. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Neev. And yes, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 18 months old. And yeah, I'm now 15. I've basically had it all my life, and no one else in my family has type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed quite early, as my mum is a nurse, and she recognised the signs and symptoms. My dad is an engineer, and he struggled to understand the complexities of type 1. Initially, he believed it was a problem that could be solved easily, like a linear way of actions. After an extremely difficult 6 months, my parents learned a lot and realised it wasn't always a set of tasks ending with perfect results. Tell me stories of managing my diabetes in a way not written about in the textbooks. I started injecting insulin, which was a nightmare. I was still breastfeeding at the time, and I would hyper in the night, and they would be shoveling Weetabix into me. Fortunately, after that, I was given an insulin pump. The hospital we were at the time, they weren't very supportive, so they just gave us a pump in a box. My dad programmed it the best he could from the internet, and that was how that went. It was quite a roller coaster through those early years, but I was never really aware of it. We searched on the internet for inspiration of other people with type 1 with a similar attitude to life as we had, and Jerry obviously popped up, and reading about his attitude to life was just such a great inspiration to them, and it was cascaded down to me. He has a philosophy of that diabetes is not an excuse, and that was a staple mantra in my family household. And even my younger sister, born 2.5 years later, she still has this mantra, and she doesn't even have diabetes, but it does affect her too. I don't really remember feeling any different from my friends at school. My mum and dad tell me they were determined not to let diabetes stop the way of life they had in mind for us as a family. And I would never go out my way to tell people that I had type 1, because I get that it can quite intimidate people and scare people. The fact, that a young child has this thing. But I've always enjoyed sports, especially skiing and running. And when I was 6, I got given the opportunity to raise money for A4D. And I decided to do a 20-mile bike ride, starting from my home in Cumbria to a small town called Sedbergh. but I didn't really know what I was in for, as it was a long way for a 6-year-old. And my friend came along and she struggled a lot as well. And I remember giggling with her on the side of the road, and our dads were fixing the bikes, and my mum and my little sister it was very icy on that day. It was very cold, and they were struggling with the van, and they would come and support us on different parts of the ride. And I was mostly looking forward to the local tea party at the end. I think that definitely helped me kind of get to the end. But yeah, it was very icy, and we did struggle to keep my bloods in check. Stopping in bus shelters on the side of the road to like scramble through Dad's bag to get hypo sweets, and it was tough, but I was really determined to get there. Because I live in such a rural area, I never really knew anyone with type 1, not even my age or really older. And I immediately wanted to help the kids in Southeast Asia, as they don't have as much resources and insulin to keep them alive living with type 1, and also carry out normal life activities. This helped me realise like how lucky I am to have free healthcare, and how I can easily get my insulin and sensors and monitors and everything. So yeah, 4 years later, after completing my bike ride, when I was 10, I had another adventure idea, which was to climb the 4,100-meter mountain called the Barre d'Écran in France. Unfortunately, on the way up, we did have some trouble with my monitors. I think we left test strips at home, and it was all a bit crazy, and that caused quite a stumble start. And then when we finally got to the refuge after climbing up the glacier, the conditions weren't looking great, and it wasn't really safe to continue. Throughout our evening at the refuge, I was low. And Dad would wake all the sweaty old men up, and he'd fed me biscuits, and we'd try and sort me out. And I was absolutely gutted. I was so eager to get to the top. But it was an amazing experience. We met some really interesting people on the way. I've also done some other little bits and bobs for A4D. I've done a 25-mile walk and challenges, such as I cycled a stage of the Tour de France with my dad on a tandem when I was 8. And I did these, to raise money for A4D, but also raise awareness, because I find that very important as well. So the mountains have always been my safe place to go. Sort of like a medicine cabinet, except instead of paracetamol and plasters, there's snow with a cool breeze on your cheeks and a sense of peace. My family are very lucky to own a small chalet in the French Alps, which really encourages me to get out into the big mountains. Over the last couple of years, I have been introduced into ski mountaineering, or skimo, and I'm now doing it for my GCSE in PE. For those who don't know, skimo is where you stick the bottom of your ski with a skin, which allows you to ski uphill, essentially allowing you to run uphill, and it allows you to travel through the mountains freely throughout the wintertime on skis without needing a chairlift. Last Christmas, I entered a couple of competitions. Having type 1 diabetes doing ski mountaineering is extremely complicated, especially in the longer races like the individual ones. I managed to place third in an international race called the Pyramenta de Tap. It was a full long day covering 10 kilometres and plus 900 metres of altitude. Now, I'm still learning how to control my bloods with sports. We basically just stuffed sugar into me before the race and hoped for the best, and I didn't have a pump on. And it wasn't really a sustainable solution, and we are currently working with a specialist team to try and identify a more suitable food intake to insulin ratio. So that was quite chaotic. But I did go low mid race. So Dad would be rubbing the glucagon into my mouth while we were still moving to try and keep my blood sugars in range. But it's really difficult with how much energy burn rate is going on. But we just kept muddling on. I tried to catch my French nemesis, who had previously beaten me on a vertical race a week or so earlier. But then, to make it even worse, I did lose a skin. Thankfully, a nice competitor lent me a skin mid-race, which did enable me to finish. but I did finish dizzy and feeling sick, but I finished, and I was very eager to just get there. So yeah, my journey with type 1 has been a roller coaster for just most of my life. We've had incidents with test strips, lost equipment, and dead monitors. I've also stored insulin in a fountain on a random mountain in the Austrian Alps, and I've done biking competitions without any equipment that I've left at home. But however, I do maintain a really good HbA1c, with fantastic support from the hospital at Leeds. And I'm very hopeful next year that I can continue my sporting endeavours and raising awareness for A4D and to finally catch my nemesis. But I just encourage everyone to have a go and try, and even if it does go wrong, because you can always learn. And I just, yeah, that's it.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Neev. That's really inspirational. I'm going to move on quickly because we're just low on time. So I'm going to introduce Diana next. Diana is another hero of mine. This girl is so gritty and tough. I don't really have the words. I'm not going to describe Diana. She's very capable of doing that for herself. But please listen, because she's the source. All right, Diana, over to you.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, so as I said before, I was diagnosed when I was 8. And my dad was type 1 diabetic. But, and you might think this would kind of be a really good thing in coming to terms with diabetes. And in some ways it was, because he knew, a fair bit about diabetes. But also, back then in the 80s, the attitude, and certainly the attitude of my family, was very much, you didn't talk about things like this. You hid it from everyone. And I remember even before I was diagnosed, I once told someone that my dad had diabetes, and I was severely told off by my dad for mentioning it. So I grew up struggling with the completely impossible control of 1 injection a day of mixing my insulins together in a massive syringe. No blood testing, just urine testing. No semblance of control at all. I'd literally take an injection in the morning before breakfast, go out for the day with a pack of glucose tablets in my pocket, and that would be it. And so consequently, the result of that, and of really struggling with the whole concept of diabetes, not knowing anyone except for my dad with diabetes, meant that I really struggled with control and mentally as well. And as I said, I ended up losing a lot of my sight when I was halfway through my PhD in my mid-20s, which is when I got an insulin pump and gradually started to turn things around. And gradually after that, that really sort of shook me up because it really hit home, actually, the serious consequences of diabetes. So I gradually began to get better control with a pump and various other things. My dad, he did really well. I mean, he was diagnosed when he was a kid, and there was almost nothing then. And he survived just over 50 years with diabetes. But unfortunately, he lost both his legs and eventually died from diabetes complications about 12 years ago now. And again, that really sort of shook me up. And I've always been the kind of person that never wanted to let it stop me. So on the one hand, I was hiding everything from people, but I also was determined, possibly because of that I wasn't going to let it hold me back. I was going to do everything that everyone else did. And that was very much my dad's attitude to life as well. He was very sporty, and he did everything he could. And I was very much the same. And I think when my dad died, and also when I lost my sight, and when I was losing my sight, they told me I was going to lose all my sight in 6 months because they thought they couldn't save it. It went downhill so fast. And again, I think that made me even more determined to kind of live life to the full and to push the boundaries. And people said, oh, you won't be able to do this, you won't be able to do that. And I kind of wanted to prove them wrong. So even though I was in the middle of losing my sight halfway through my PhD, I was determined to finish my PhD in 3 years just to prove that I could, and it wasn't going to stop me. So that's kind of been my attitude towards diabetes. And I gradually became more and more open about it and started meeting other people with tier 1D. And my attitude changed to almost the opposite now, where I kind of go out of my way to try and help other people because I know what it's like to really struggle with it. So I try and do things to help other people, to inspire them, to, you know, I talk to them, I try and I raise money for Action4Diabetes, and I've sort of learned to, so it's kind of gone the flip side. So I've done a number of challenges over the years. I did a 50-mile walk for Action4Diabetes, which I helped organize as well. And I started running about 6 years ago, kind of by accident, really. I have all my friends, or most of my friends, are very, very sporty, and they're all off to running and doing triathlons and marathons and ultra marathons and running the Marathon des Sables and climbing ridiculous mountains and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's kind of hard not to get caught up in this. And I'm also super competitive. So I gradually started running, and I started with doing a 5K and then some 10Ks. And then a few years ago, 2 years ago, I decided to have a go at a half marathon, which I also raised money for Action4Diabetes for. So I started training, and that all went quite well, went to plan more or less. And I figured out what to do with my blood sugars and so on. So essentially, when I run, I take about 30 grams of carbohydrate per half hour or 3 miles of running, and that typically kind of sustains me. There's a few things here and there, but generally that works quite well, and that worked quite well. So this year I decided that I was going to do my first marathon, because I've got lots of friends that run marathons. The other thing that kind of totally changed my attitude to running was about 3 years ago, I came across a charity called Vision of Adventure, and they help people who are visually impaired to get out and do active things. And they introduced me to the world of running with a guide, doing triathlon with guides, cycling on a tandem bike, which I now do. And that totally changed my attitude to sport, because I was struggling to do everything as if I was fully sighted. But I struggle with things like I can't run at all in the dark or dim light or very bright light, or when it's raining heavily, or when it's traily. I trip over steps, I might run into things and all sorts. I've got no depth perception. So they introduced me to guide running, and that totally changed the way I thought about doing all these active things. So then I was now competing and doing things as a visually impaired person in my own right, and not trying to hide it, but taking advantage of everything there was to help. So anyway, I entered my first marathon this year, and I was terrified, but I worked on the same principle that I'd done for the half marathon, just gradually increasing the distance every time I went out to run, working on the same principle of fueling and so on. And I did quite a lot of training runs, and I also did quite a few events, because I discovered with races that adrenaline and stress can play absolute havoc with your blood sugar levels. So especially going stupidly high right at the start of a race and trying to run with a blood sugar of 20 is like wading through treacle. It's just horrific. And can take a long time to get it down. And then once you try and add insulin while you're running, one of two things happen. You either don't take enough and you still feel like you're running through treacle to the end of the event, or you take too much and your blood sugar comes crashing down, and then you're fighting lows. So anyway, it got to the day of the marathon, which was in April this year. I did Manchester Marathon. I was kind of all set, thought I had a good strategy, and we set off. And my blood sugar went a bit high in the morning. I really struggled with nerves, so I struggled to get my porridge down in the morning. So my blood sugar went high. And then just as the race was starting, it started dropping down. So I thought, this is absolutely perfect. And we set off, and about 3 miles in, my blood sugar started to crash. And so I got a gel out and started trying to get carbs into me. and it would not come up. And I was struggling. I did the first 12 miles, I think I did, with a blood sugar between 3.5 and 5. And I was just constantly fighting the low blood sugar, feeling more and more sick as time went on, until I got to the point after about 15 miles that I just felt so sick. I couldn't even run. I couldn't swallow. My guide was desperately trying to like shovel jelly babies into me. And I was doing my best to refuse, but he's worked with me quite a lot, and he knows now that he just has to persevere. But eventually I just felt so sick and I just couldn't even walk. So I just sort of collapsed on the side of the road, with my guide still trying to shovel jelly babies into me at 17 miles. And I sat there and I thought, this is it. There's no way. And the medics came and they looked at me and they went, you're not going on. By this time I've been sat down for quite a while, so it's also getting quite cold. And so all my muscles were seizing up. And I was absolutely gutted, but I just couldn't move, basically. So the police car happened to come past, and they said, oh, we'll take you back to the start, because I couldn't even walk to the tram stop. I was still really struggling with my blood sugar. And my guide said, and I thought this was a bit strange, but he said, would you mind if I go on and finish the race? And I thought, well, that's a bit odd, but, you know, of course, you know, so I said, go on, you know, it's fine, go and finish the race, you know, go and get your medal. And anyway, we got back to the start and eventually managed to get my blood sugar to come up, and I started feeling a bit less sick. And my guide met me a bit later, and he came into the cafe where we were sat with my partner, and he said, he said, here's your medal. I went and finished the race just so I could get you your medal. He said, I know how hard you've worked to deserve this. He said, I know what a massive challenge this was. You know, you've done everything, you've done all the training. He said, it wasn't your day, but you deserve the medal far more than he did. And so he presented me with the medal. And at that point, I couldn't say no, even though I felt like I really didn't deserve it. And he said, as he went over the finish line in front of the camera, he made a D sign in sign language for the photo, because he said, I wanted to represent you as you crossed the line. So it's made me quite emotional talking about that. But anyway, so I mean, I spent about 2 days feeling very sorry for myself and just being absolutely gutted, because this had been the thing I've been building up to. I'd been an absolute nightmare for months, stressing about this marathon that I wanted so badly, just to prove that I could do it. But then, you know, I got thinking, I got talking to my guide and my partner, and so he said, do you want to you know, do you want to have another go? And I was like, of course I bloody do. I'm not giving up on this. And I think just even that evening, we'd already entered the marathon for next year. And then I got thinking, and I said to Mike, I can't wait a year to do it again. I need to do that. I need to prove the point. And so we looked around and we decided to enter the Yorkshire Marathon, which is in October this year. So I've now started training again. I had about 2 days off, and then I was back training, and I think it's kick-started now even more motivation just to keep going. And this is the thing, I think, diabetes can be an absolute bugger, basically. You can do everything right, and then sometimes you can think you know exactly what you're doing, you can have a plan, and then sometimes it just all falls apart for no reason that you can really identify. And it's you just have to pick yourself up and keep going. And it's hard, but yeah, you just I don't know, I think it drives me all the more. And I think the reason that I feel so emotional about the whole event, and especially the actions of Mike, my guide, were because they get it. And I think it's really hard to say this in any way, but I know how inspirational it is for other people when people like us get up and do stuff, whether we fail or not. And sometimes we fail and we get up and we try again. And sometimes it's quite nice, actually, in a weird way, to know that other people struggle as well, that it's not always easy. It's not just all about.
Oh, God. I lost you.
So, yeah. Sorry.
Are you there?
Yeah.
You're right, Diana? Yeah.
I went out.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you so much for that. I know you want to say more. I'm just very aware of time, so I'm just going to crack on because I think there's already quite a few questions and stuff people want to answer.
Jerry, we always run over.
Oh, okay.
Time is relative in diabetes chat terms. So yeah, just take as long as you like. Honestly, it's we love hearing people's experience.
Okay, brilliant. Well, first of all, just thanks again, Diana, for that, and thanks so much for being so open and honest and for sharing. I think like you, like us all, really, I see type 1 as a lifestyle condition. It's all about the style in which I live my life and how it affects my psyche. Personally, I learn by doing. I'm not very intelligent, and so I have to do things to find out. And by regularly playing with my condition and experimenting, researching, and doing, outdoor stuff, I learn a bit more about my own condition each day. So I become my own doctor. That's the only way I can see this continuing, because I can't rely on a doctor every minute of every day. So each year I do a fundraising challenge, and that allows me to give back and help others. For me, it's a great way of feeling positive about my own condition. When I give back, I'm also learning about myself, what's important to me, my family, and what motivates me. And motivation, for me, again, is the key to good blood sugar control. So I was diagnosed with T1D in 2001. And despite being an expedition climber, I was told my big mountain days, climbing days, were over. But instinctively, I thought, no, not even a qualified doctor can tell me what I can and cannot do. So I continued with my climbing. I continued with my expeditions. And then we get to 2006. I had a tipping point, a sort of revelatory experience in Madagascar, climbing the largest mountain rock wall in Africa. And since then, every year, I've done a challenge, what I call a JIC, a Jerry's Insulin Challenge, to raise money for impoverished children with type 1 diabetes. And I'll explain a bit more about that a bit later on. So we come to the summer of 2017, and I was training for a 24-hour Sea to Summit challenge that had never been attempted before, but something pretty bad happened which stopped me dead in my tracks. The challenge was to cycle on road bikes from Nice on the south coast of France through the southern Alps to the base of the highest peak wholly inside France. It's a 4,000-meter mountain called the Bar des Écrins. The distance horizontal is 220 kilometers with a 4,700-meter elevation gain. So horizontal 220K, elevation, vertical height just under 5,000 meters. Then from the base of the mountain, we had to hike and then climb over steep snow and ice with crampons and ice axes to the summit of the bar. That distance again was 14.5 kilometers and another 2,000 meters of elevation gain. And the aim was to do all of that from Nice on the coast of France to the summit of the bar within 24 hours. So on the 10th of August 2017, whilst training on my bike for this challenge, someone drove straight into my path as I was descending at 30 kilometers an hour, and I was catapulted meters into the air and landed on my neck, and I broke my C6 vertebrae. My broken neck resulted in partial paralysis and extensive nerve damage. Worse was that I had lost most of the deltoids in my right shoulder. Those are the pulling muscles that are essential for climbers. I was rushed overnight by ambulance down to Marseille Hospital and then went through a 4-hour operation that resulted having effectively a shock absorber put between my C6 and C7 vertebrae to strengthen them and keep them apart, and I wear this shock absorber for the rest of my life. So when I came out of hospital on 17th of August, I literally could not lift a soup spoon to my mouth. There's videos of me trying. I just could not lift a soup spoon. But within a week or so of coming out of the hospital, I vowed to myself I would get fit again and as quickly as possible have another crack at my Cedar Summit. So I then spent the next 6 months doing intensive readaptation, muscle building and physio to try and win back those lost muscles. And then that was followed by 4 months of road biking and altitude training to try and get fit again. So this recovery phase, I had to deal with a chronic case of PTSD because I was really crushed by the effects of this accident and the burnout from trying to manage my blood sugar levels, which were just fluctuating madly. But I was determined to live by my personal mantra. And for me, it's you can always do more than you think you can. That and playing my part in the development of Action4Diabetes were my main drivers. But this readaptive training, I've got to say, was pretty tough. A taxi would pick me up from my house 3 times a week, and I'd spend 4 hours at the local physios performing tiny repetitive movements to bring strength back into my lifeless arm. The first time I even tried to throw a dart, because I do love darts. I tried to throw this dart into a dartboard. I mean, it was hilarious. The dart just fell out of my hand onto the floor and speared my foot in the process. So yelping with pain, I was hopping around the room, blood pouring out of my toes, thinking, yeah, this is not good. I can also remember trying for ages to lift tiny metal discs the size of my wife's wedding ring, just 2 centimeters, from one horizontal wooden stick up to another. Each little ring of metal had to be pulled along a horizontal bar at chest height and then lifted 2 inches and slid along a slightly higher bar. There were 5 bars, and the aim was to get all the rings to the top bars. So it's like start, slide, grit, repeat. When I started in late August, I could hardly manage a single row, and it was exhausting. And there were often days when I just gave up. I couldn't do anything. It was just so easy to wallow in self-pity. But each time I did, I would see in my mind, the faces of those kids we help at A4D, and I just had to give myself a really good talking to. I mean, here in the UK, if you live with T1D, you literally have everything, as we all know. You've got pumps, pens, BGMs, CGMs, healthcare professionals, clubs, forums, websites, peer support, you name it, we've got it. In countries where we operate, where Action4Diabetes operates, like Myanmar, Cambodia, or Laos, there are huge gaps in healthcare where there's just little or no help, not even basics like insulin and BGMs. And that was my motivation, really, getting fit again, thinking about how these kids, some as young as 4 or 5, without any help, would die slowly and painfully over about a 6-month process. At the end, a kid literally looks like an Auschwitz victim as their systems extract everything they can from their tortured bodies. And I knew that the money we would raise from our Cedar Summit Challenge would result in saving many innocent lives. But I gotta say, it was slow, and then again, really slow. By late November, just 3 months after my accident, my muscle rehabilitation and progress was still in the toilet. When a nerve is cut or damaged, it will try to repair itself. So nerve fibers shrink back and rest for about a month. Then they begin to grow again, but slowly. We're talking 1 millimeter a day. That's how slow they grow back. I was alone now in the Alps. Jackie, my wife, was back in England looking after her sick mother, and I was left to contemplate my lot. The other issue I had to deal with, other than trying to control my wildly oscillating sugars, was purely psychological. Because after the neck operation, the surgeon told me I could still carry on some basic level of sport, but if I had another bike accident or had another big trauma to my neck, it could mean permanent paralysis. I sat on my bed and I looked out at the incessant stream of flakes falling across the window panes, heavy snow that signaled the start of an amazing alpine winter. But I knew it would be a winter where I'd do nothing active other than pile up those bloody rings and try not to drop any more darts onto my toes. So long story short, on the 25th of August, 2018, just a year after I broke my neck, together with athletes Alunka Beermans, Wout van Oof, Guillaume Rousset and Hugh Robinson, all non-TD1 and all many years younger than myself, we completed our Cedar Summit Challenge. We did it in a total time of 21 hours, 56 minutes, but it was brutal and very cold at the end as we neared the summit. Temperatures were as low as -20 on the Barre des Écrins that morning. We'd gone through the night and we were very low. And my rope partner, Hugh, collapsed from fatigue and cold. But we did it. We raised just over $50,000 in the process for Action for Diabetes, enough money to keep more than 100 T1D children alive for a year. So to sum up my way of dealing with T1D, I created a phrase that I live by and invented an anachronism that describes my approach. So the phrase is, and you've heard it already before, diabetes is not an excuse. And the anachronism is ROAR, ROAR, risk, organization, action, results. So let me just break that down for you. So risk, we all have to deal with the risks of living a full life with T1D. So to reduce it, personally, I try as best I can to put my energies into trying to maintain good blood sugars rather than worry about things like T1D complications and DKA. In this way, I put the risk into perspective and I can deal with it knowing I'm doing my best, and that's all I can do. The O is for organization, and this is essential for me if I want to do the things I love. I experiment and practice regularly. And when I go for a big climb in the Alps or further afield, I'm drawing on the cumulative experience and training from hundreds of previous climbs, many hypos, many hypers, different levels of insulin, both slow and fast, and trying out different BGMs kept in specially designed protective pouches. And I've tried a lot of different pouches, trust me. So I believe in experimenting and always with the support of peers or partners or HCPs. And then I can really, I can live with this condition because if I don't, I'd just be living in fear. I'd always be worried that something might happen that I didn't know about, or I was not able to control, or I was not prepared for. But by this organization and experimentation, I don't live in fear. The A is for action, and I regularly put my learning and experimentation into action as often as I can, in fact. So I love doing this and seeing how my body responds and what I can achieve, both mentally and physically. And finally, that second R is results. I gain results, and that leads to increased motivation, which means increased confidence and therefore better blood sugar control. So I roared when we completed our Seed to Summit challenge in 2018, and I tried to roar as loudly and as often as I can. And that's how I deal with my lifestyle condition. That's how I learn a bit more about my condition each day, so I become my own doctor. And that's how I give back and help others to feel positive and motivated about my own condition. So I'm just going to end there, but I'm going to have one more thing to say. And I just want to mention this. My last JIC was my cycle ride to Ukraine last year when we cycled from London to Kyiv to raise money for children with T1D living close to the front line. It took us 26 days to cycle across Europe, and we were eating different food for every meal of every day, and all on insulin pens and with no support. The team was just Paul Buckley, my cycling partner, our incredible Ukrainian cycling guide, Alex, and me. Paul and I cycled 3,200 kilometers on that trip. We'd never done anything like that before, and I'd met Paul for the first and only time in June, 2 months prior to the ride, and had only spoken to him face to face for less than an hour before we started the ride. Paul does not live with T1D, yet was incredibly patient and understanding of all my mood swings, my hypos and my hypers. And there were a few, I can tell you. It was a huge emotional roller coaster of a challenge. And as we hugged on the streets of Kyiv that last night in Ukraine, we both agreed diabetes is not an excuse. And before I start crying, I think I'm going to hand you over.
Absolutely inspirational, all three of you. It's great to, I mean, I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody listening. It's just, yeah, we sometimes kind of get caught up in the low blood sugar, high blood sugar, and we think about all the things that we were told we can't do, and then we listen to, you know, you three who have done such amazing things. It's just I really got to get out and you know, set set some targets for myself. It's yeah, it's interesting. It's incredible. I mean, you know, the work. I think everybody, as I said, everybody's just absolutely blown away by, you know, the things you've achieved. Diana, Jerry, and Neev. It's just, yeah, incredible, incredible. It's funny you mentioned, Jerry. You mentioned your accident. I had a similar accident. Well, not a similar accident. I broke a collarbone and several ribs a while ago, and I've felt the, you know, I felt the same PTSD about getting back on my bike. It's just, yeah, it's interesting that kind of rang a bell. Obviously, your accident was much more serious, but it's how did you confront that PTSD and you know, what was your feelings the first few times you got back out on your bike out on the road?
You know, frankly, by the time I got to being on my bike, being able to get back on my bike, it was relief.
Okay.
The real hard stuff was just getting off my bed in those early months, just feeling shit and just feeling like,
Yeah.
I just can't do this. It's just all too much. You know, I'm not young. I've got diabetes. I've broken my neck. You know, I just don't think I can handle it. But at the end of the day, you have to just try, you know, little steps. I'm a big believer in little steps. You know, just like I lifted those rings 1 inch, 2 inches, I just kept lifting them up and up. And that's all we can do. Little steps, bit by bit, builds the bridge, builds the mountain. And I think that's the way, you know, to approach anything in life. You can't, you know, look at the top of Everest and go, right, well, I'll just be at the summit. You know, you've got to look at the first camp and then the second camp, and you just build it up. Whatever you're doing in your life, step by step, and you'll get there.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you said. Yeah, I think it was particularly at the age I was, you know, early 50s, and for falling off a bike. It's just that I think it was that frustration at being so vulnerable, and the fact that, you know, the amount of times in my teens and 20s I fell off bikes and bounced, and you know, and yeah, it was interesting kind of hearing your answer about it. It's the journey of 1,000 miles. He started with a single step. It's finding the motivation to kind of get on, you know, and confront, as I said, I use that word in the question, confront the PTSD. It's just, you know, what happens if I fall again? Well, what happens if you don't fall again? It's just, which is more likely, because you've now got the experience of going through that process, and yeah, really interesting, really interesting. Yeah, incredible.
And Neev, did you want to come in on that one, or Diana? Are they gone?
Yeah, I definitely understand that, and how just annoying it is to sat there with because I broke my humerus, and I definitely understand that. Just sat there, you just want to get back out, but you can't, and it's all just crashing down on you, and it just feels awful. I really understand that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've had quite a few accidents as well, and I had a few accidents. I was still cycling on a solo bike until about 3 years ago, even though I have not a lot of sight. And it was one of those things. I stopped cycling when I lost my sight, and then about 6 or 7 years later, I kind of thought, I wonder if I could still cycle. And I kind of had a go, and I was absolutely terrified. And I got on my mountain bike. Actually, I got on a borrowed mountain bike, so I'd sold all my bikes at this point. And I borrowed a mountain bike and got on. I was absolutely petrified. And then I thought, okay, I can do this. And I gradually started cycling again. But then I maybe pushed myself a bit far, and I did quite a few cycling holidays, including some mountain biking trips. and had a couple of quite bad accidents, and I really lost my nerve with that. And it took a while, and I did get back to cycling, but then I discovered tandem cycling, and I just thought, why am I making my life so hard when I don't actually need to? So for me, it was about finding a solution that actually was just as good, but made my life a lot safer. And since I started tandem cycling, I actually haven't been on myself. I've still got 2 solo bikes. I've got a mountain bike and a hybrid bike, and I've not been on them since, although I keep thinking maybe I should just get on them just to prove I can. So, but yeah, very much.
Is it with your obviously with your running guide? Is it all about kind of having to put faith in their kind of, you know, their guidance, or is it very often, is it about, you know, they try not to kind of talk to you every single step, more of a case of being a gradual guide? I mean, how does it work?
So the running guide thing, it's really interesting. I mean, I could talk for hours about this, but it's very individual. So everybody's different in what they want from a guide and how you work together. So you learn, and I have quite a few guides, but I have one person who does quite a lot of guiding now, and you work out together what you want from them. And I always say I'd much rather have too much information than too little. So I don't mind if they tell me things that I know are there. But if they forget, it's my first guide I had, and we were running along, and I could see quite a lot. And then there was a speed bump, and she didn't tell me about the speed bump, and I just didn't see it. And I tripped and would have gone flying, except for the fact that we were tethered together, and she was able to stop me falling. And that made me, again, it just made me realize 99% of the time I might have seen that speed bump, but one time I didn't. And I was really glad to have her there. So yeah, it's just about everyone's different, and you know, you work together, and sometimes depends on the conditions. Sometimes we won't actually be tethered. He'll just run side by side, and he'll just point out things and warn me about any obstacles. If it's a bit more tricky, or I'm not feeling very confident, or there's a lot of people, then we might be tethered together, which just gives a bit more support. But yeah,
and is it weather dependent? Where you won't go out in certain conditions, things like ice and rain and stuff?
Definitely. I mean, ice is definitely. I mean, I hate running when there's any risk of ice around. But yes, I struggle to see a lot more, and as soon as the light gets bad, I struggle to see, or if it's very bright, if it's raining or whatever, then I struggle to see a lot more. So I mean, I'll go out with a guide. I do still run on my own when where I know I'm okay. I know the route. I know there's, you know, where the obstacles are likely to be, and the light is good. Then I do run on my own. But if there's any kind of anything sort of tricky, or if it's traily, or if it's dark or whatever, then I am really reliant on a guide. So again, it's, you know, I kind of adjust to different situations.
Well, it's just, again, as I said previously, it's absolutely, you know, in absolute awe, because obviously I think particularly with Neev and Jerry, you know, we're doing this thing with a condition that we need to manage, but you're having to manage your condition as well as the fact that you're visually impaired, and so that kind of complicates things even more. And so are there times when you is it always a constant balance, or do sometimes when your condition, when you start to feel a bit hypo, do you tend to worry less about your visual the visual side of things, or is it always 50% to each?
It's always, it varies. I mean, depending on, you know, how I'm feeling, might depend on what I'm worrying about. But the thing is, if my blood control's not good, so if my blood sugar is low, then I'm much more unstable on my feet anyway, and my vision might start to go down a bit. Or similarly, if I'm high. So if I'm high or low, my sight typically is worse, and I'm a bit less, you know, steady on my feet. So there is a big difference. And now the guide that runs a lot with me, he's actually quite good at spotting when I'm looking like I'm a bit low, sometimes before my alarm goes off on my CGM. And he's very good at nudging me and saying, do you need a jelly baby?
Are there any kind of tech things that you can? I know with Dexcom, you can have Dexcom Share, which allows you to kind of share your blood sugars. I mean, are there any kind of tricks that you tend to use like that? So he has stuff on his smartwatch. I mean,
well, he can see my watch because he runs on my left, and I have my watch on my left side, and he can actually see my blood sugar streaming on my watch. My partner's always doing that as well. He's always grabbing my hand or just glancing over. It drives me absolutely insane when he does it. But he'd be like,
I wouldn't.
It's low. And I'm like, shut up.
I wouldn't. I don't do that with my wife. It's just I don't like the. Okay, are you okay when I'm like 5.4?
I kind of hate it, but I'm also quite grateful, especially if it's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
My partner does it. But no, my running guide can look at my watch, because I can't really see my watch as well. I can't always see it when I'm running. If I'm stood still and kind of focusing, I can see it, but I can't always see the numbers while I'm running. So I've trained all my guides to look at my to how to interpret the numbers on my watch, so that they can also so I can just say, how's my blood sugar doing, and they can glance over and tell me. So that's quite
and what about you, Neev? Do you tend to use kind of smartwatches and stuff, technologies to kind of, you know, when you're out?
Yeah, so because I'm on the closed loop on the CAMS app, it's all quite new to me. I've had it maybe just under a year now. Before, I did have a Dexcom in with closed loop with the I can't remember what pump, but I have never really gotten on with Dexcoms. But it's all on a Samsung phone, so it's actually separate to my usual everyday phone. But we've always really just had a monitor or a phone, but I've never really added it onto my watch or anything like fancy like that. We've always just usually had it in separate areas, you know, so it's all together kind of thing. But
there's so many hacks nowadays, aren't they? They say, you know, things like, I think sugar, and I work in IT. I've been a programmer for 30 years, but it's just, you know, I'm the least technological when it comes to my diabetes tech. It's just, and there's videos like where you see people linking their blood sugar to their Apple CarPlay. It's just amazing. Honestly, it's just incredible. All the little tricks and stuff. It's you know,
I would highly recommend connecting it through your smartwatch, because it's just, I know it's not that hard to look at your phone, but it's so much easier when you're active to just glance at your watch and instantly see your blood sugar.
I'd also say there's I get back to that point about, you know, each diabetic is different, and their psychology is different. But I'm hearing more and more, certainly with the younger people, that they find tech is forced on them and they don't always want it. And I think I can relate to that, because, you know, tech is good if you want it and you know how to use it and it helps you, but it's not the only solution. And I think we have to be quite careful, you know, just saying, you have to be on this, and this is what's the source, and this is what'll work. Because, you know, I mean, for instance, closed loop, for some people it can really be brilliant. For others, it just doesn't work and they don't like it. And I think we have to be open to that. And I say that just because to me, the whole thing is about psychology. And if you're not motivated, then it doesn't matter how good the tech is, it's not going to work for you.
I'd agree with that entirely. It's there are, for all the brilliance of my T-Slim with the Dexcom and Control IQ, for all the brilliance, you know, there are some days when I just don't want to I don't want to be notified so often of where I am and what time where I am and stuff. It's just, you know, there are days of kind of burnout, and so it's very difficult. It's like, in a way, it's like mobile phones, isn't it? You know, 30 years ago, nobody had access to that, and so and you know, we still got by, and nowadays we have these things in our hands constantly, and it's sometimes difficult to strike a balance between having, you know, and again, we come back to obviously people who are not as fortunate with technology or not as fortunate with in parts of the world, and you know, I think it's
I mean, I've got to tell you a story about when Charlie and I first started Action for Diabetes in 2015, as Fiona alluded to. We started with 12 type 1 diabetic kids in the Children's Hospital in Yangon in Myanmar. So 12 kids, and we started with them. And I met up with a few of those kids last year in November in Yangon, and there was one young girl there who is now 22, and so she's on Mixtard, which I'm sure you guys know. It's basically a mix of basal and bolus insulins, long and slow and fast-acting insulins. So it's very basic insulin. She's on that, and she's on 4 test strips a day. And her HbA1cs are 6.8, and I'm just blown away, you know. And there's no tech whatsoever. She just has BGMs, like I said, 4 strips a day, and Mixtard, the most basic. And she has syringes as well. There's no, you know, pens. So, you know, I think that kind of, in a way, says it all. If you're motivated, yeah, you can do pretty much anything. But if you're not, you can have the best kit on the planet, and you can still have HbA1cs up in the 10s or higher, you know.
Yeah, true. Like, you know, like we did when we were, probably myself and Diane. It's, you know, when we were diagnosed back in the, you know, the dark times, you know, you had very limited ways of monitoring or controlling. So don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting subject, isn't it? Tom, how we doing for time?
It's been fun. It's been truly sensational. Thank you so much, Jerry, Diane.
As we said, Jerry,
Fiona.
for us, diabetes chat, time is relative. We finish when we finish.
we do. But this is exactly why I set Diabetes Chat up over 2 years ago, to talk and connect and hear stories. And tonight we've heard 3 fantastic stories, different stories, so inspiring. So, you know what I mean? So many moments tonight. I've just literally just sat here and nearly in tears, really. And so just blown away by the awesome things that you guys told us tonight. So inspiring and so different. 3 individual stories. So thank you, honestly, so much for coming on and sharing, honestly. And thank you so much.
No worries. No worries.
So can I ask one question then to maybe finish? Well, two questions. One, Jerry, let's start with you. Is where can people find out more about Action for Diabetes, and what's upcoming for Action for Diabetes? And then I will finish with one final question for the 3 of you.
So they can find out more about Action for Diabetes through 2 websites. The first one is Action4Diabetes.org, and that pretty much gives you the whole picture. But our educational platform in local language, we're very proud of, and I'd really like to talk about that, and that's hellotype1.com. So if you put in hello type 1, you'll find it. It's in 5 different languages, including English, and we're extend that as we go into different countries. We'll have more different languages. And I would just say, if anybody wants to get involved or help or support or do challenges, really, really welcome. We really encourage anybody to do that. And we're very easy to get hold of. You can find me through jerrygore.com. You can contact us through Action4Diabetes.org, and you can contact us through, as I said, Hello Type 1 as well. We're very easy to get hold of, and if anybody wants to help, get involved, raise money, please give us a shout.
Amazing, thank you so much. So please go check that out. Hopefully people that will be listening back on our podcast can do that. And final question from me really is, you guys are just sensational, your journey that you've been on to date. But what's next? Do you reckon in your own journey with diabetes, maybe relating it to diabetes? So Jerry, Diana, and Neev, what's next for you? What's the next chapter, or what would you like to maybe do next?
Who wants to go first? Neev, what do you want to do?
Go for it, Jerry.
Well, obviously, as I've said before, I'm quite eager with all my skiing, and every Saturday I do help instruct adaptive skiing. So that's people that maybe struggle with skiing or have disabilities that don't enable them to ski. So I would really enjoy to start maybe ski instructing and traveling a bit and meeting new people and challenging myself a bit more. That it might not even be big things, but just challenging myself and just getting there, really.
Amazing.
From my side, I would just say on that note, Neev, my partner's actually an adaptive ski instructor.
There we go.
So I'll put you in touch.
Definitely.
He's done all kinds of so he teaches all kinds of snow skiing and snowboarding or he did until he got injured or ill. But anyway, from my side, I'm never satisfied. I always want to do more. Even if I won an Olympic gold medal, it wouldn't be enough. I'd want 3, I'd want 10, so I can always push myself more. So
I'm like Diana, I'm like that with bass guitars.
I mean, getting that marathon nailed, and then once we've got a marathon nailed and maybe done a couple more, I like to build up gradually. I'm not one of these people that goes from nothing to running a marathon. I like to build my things up. So I want to get that marathon nailed. I'm doing another sprint, another standard distance triathlon in a couple of weeks' time. Which is another slight demon of mine because I had issues when I did the first one. But ultimately, if that goes well, if they both go well, I might think about half Ironman. I had that in the back of my mind for a while. My partner keeps telling me I'm going to end up doing some ultra marathons because he's also an ultra marathon runner. But I kind of been thinking about half Ironman for a while. So I don't know if I'll ever get to the craziness of full Ironman, but if I get as far as half Ironman, then there'll be more. So there's always more challenges. I'm still contemplating going back and doing Kilimanjaro again.
Wow.
Was another expedition that I didn't quite make it to the top, but that's a whole nother story. So there's always more, and I feel like everyone runs marathons, so doing marathons nothing really. So if I do an ultra, I'll be like, oh, everyone does ultras. So
it all sounds absolutely, all of it sounds absolutely sensational. And despite what the next chapter is, you know what I mean, just be proud of what you guys have done before now, because everything you have done, your story is absolutely sensational. So whatever you guys do going forward, like amazing, and we look forward to following you on your journey, every step, one step at a time, like Jerry said before. That's what it's about, isn't it? And what about you, Jerry? What's next for Jerry?
So my JIC, my insulin challenge this year is a traverse north to south of the Philippines on a bike. So the Philippines are basically a bunch of islands, so it's pretty difficult on a bike. But the Philippines is our 7th country, and I've got a JIC called Mission 300, and we're trying to raise money to support 300 impoverished children with T1D in the Philippines. And so I'm riding north to south across the 3 main islands in all sorts of terrain, from Cordillera, muddy mountain bike, through to road, through to rural stuff, gravel. And I'll be doing that at the end of the year in November, and hopefully reporting back Diabetes Chat early in 2025.
Absolutely. We'll book that in early 2025. And you know what I mean? We've loved everything that Action for Diabetes stands for, the ethos. We feel it, you know what I mean? And it's been great that we've done a couple of chats. And yeah, let's keep connected. Let's keep how we can support you guys. And yeah, we'll definitely connect up early 2025 and talk more for sure.
Brilliant, and thanks again so much for inviting us. Okay. Speaking on behalf of the team, thank you, and I'm sure Neev and Diana want to say that.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much, and Tony, what a fantastic night, and you hosted spectacular. I'll go shut up again. You brought me into the conversation, so you know what I'm like once I get talking. So
I am fairly speechless in terms of you know, it takes me about 3 weeks in order to kind of convince myself to walk to the end of the road. So just, absolutely, the just being in the presence of such amazing people who have achieved amazing things. It's just I feel suitably. I need to walk to the end of the road and come back tomorrow, I think.
It's all gradual though, isn't it? You know, you don't have to go from walking to the end of the road to running an ultra marathon. You know, you do it step by step, a little bit more, and before you know
well,
it.
the end of the road, Diana, is probably only about 150 yards.
tomorrow's target, Tone. Come on, you can do
it.
it.
Everybody's road is different. It doesn't matter. And I think probably one of the worst things about social media is its endless comparisons.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's what you can do and enjoy doing it. And if some of the things we talked about make sense, that's great. But it's just having a go, getting out of your comfort zone. I honestly think how you learn, or when you learn, is when you're out of your comfort zone. And I think we're so keen to crawl right as deep into it as we can, and we're not learning. We have to get out and we have to learn, and then for me that's living.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. I think that concludes tonight's chat. Fantastic. We're all on our own individual journeys, and the most important thing is ourselves, and we need to do what's best for you. And I think tonight's been really inspirational, and I think we've taken a lot from it. So thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Diana and Neev, and Action for Diabetes. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.